All right, here it is.
Now just snip those cables and off we go.
One of the core subplots of the storyline is regarding the Combine imprisonment and use of the Vortigaunts to trap the G-Man. The multidimensional power of the Vortigaunts to detain the seemingly invincible G-Man is established in previous Half-Life lore. Through the use of their prisoner pods and substation technology, the Combine extract the power of the Vortigaunts' Vortessence chant, tune that energy, and then transmit it to the vault to contain the G-Man. To communicate this Combine process to the player without explaining it through lengthy exposition, we used musical sound patterns to represent the process implicitly. If you stand near the pods holding the Vortigaunts, you can hear them groaning their chant in a slow but semi-musical pattern.
Way to disconnect the cables in here.
Just past the pods is the resonator, within which you can hear a distilled version of the chant energy. Finally, the cables are activated with the concentrated Vortigaunt energy, which is harmonized in varying patterns and intermittently transmitted to the vault once the energy is sufficiently tuned. If you stand near the cables while they're tuning, you'll notice the sheer size and height of the sound. This was achieved by placing the sound emitters for each cable at the locations of the actual cables themselves. The sound of the cables covers a broad frequency range, which emphasizes Steam Audio's head-related transfer function processing. That simulation, combined with the feedback of the observer's inner ear as she looks upwards, gives the same impression of scale that VR is known to give visual objects.
Great. Now go inside and deactivate the power source.
Character performance within a VR game has a unique set of opportunities and challenges. In our efforts to keep control in the hands of the player, we must create a performance that is interesting enough to maintain players' attention, but flexible enough to allow for player freedom. This scene has the most face-to-face interaction in the game, and there is no physical barrier between the player and the Vortigaunt when he first appears. At one point, we played with the idea of a jump scare when the Vortigaunt is released, upending the player's expectations of what had been referred to only as a battery up until that point. Not only was it a bit ham-fisted, but the Vortigaunt came flailing out of the pod, frequently into the same space occupied by the player. To solve this problem, we cut the jump scare and slid the pod back out of the player's space as it opened, to allow for the Vortigaunt to emerge at a comfortable distance. We faced a similar challenge when determining how to get both the player and Vortigaunt to their next locations without intersecting. We wanted to get the player and Vortigaunt side by side overlooking the vista, while the Vortigaunt delivered critical exposition. It would have been awkward for the player and Vortigaunt to take the same route along the catwalk, so we looked at other options, including exploring ways that the Vortigaunt may have once moved in its native environment. With long forearms, it's feasible that the Vortigaunts may have moved around as quadrupeds, so we chose an agile four-legged scramble up to the higher platform, where he can deliver exposition without contending with the player for
I
space.
can't get into the vault if the substations are still online.
Do not worry, Alyx Vance. They will not be. We will not allow it. I will clear the path. Our paths diverge. But remember, there is no distance between us. We are coterminous.
Thanks. Good luck.
We're putting a lot of trust in that Vortigaunt to shut down all the substations.
I trust him.
Yes, me too. Because if he doesn't, well, that vault isn't going anywhere, and we'll be standing there with no vault to break into, surrounded by Combine.
Russ, trusting him is our only plan here. He'll do this. We can do this.
Yes, you're right. He'll be fine. We're all going to be fine.
You think, Russ? Guess we better cooperate.
Yeah, she sounds like she means business.
We had a good run.
Cooperate.
The Combine soldier you see here won't fight you. It's been programmed to run back and forth along the path shown on the ground in order to illustrate the stride retargeting system developed for Half-Life Alyx. One of the challenges of animating digital characters is making sure that their feet don't slide along the ground as they move. Humans are very good at picking out irregularities in the movements of virtual characters, especially in VR, and Combine soldiers in particular need to look like their feet are planting and their weight is shifting as they change direction. Otherwise, they appear weightless and unconvincing. In a pre-processing phase, our stride retargeting system analyzes the steps of each authored animation and stores them as a direction-independent trajectory. At runtime, our system predicts where each foot will land on the next step based on the motion of the animation, the character's path, and the height of the ground. The pairs of colored boxes on the ground illustrate this process. The red boxes show the previous foot positions, the green boxes indicate the soldier's current foot position, and the blue boxes are drawn where each foot is predicted to land next. Once the predicted foot positions are calculated, the system guides the feet to the predicted locations using the trajectory information to preserve the style of the original animation. Once the foot lands, it is locked in place until the next step. In the end, this system was so effective that we could essentially make any animation walk in any direction without foot sliding. You can experiment with the system by moving around the area, since the soldier has been set up to always face you while running the specified path.
You can put that to good use.
Getting kind of crowded down here, Russ.
Comm channel's gone crazy since we took out that substation. They know we're after the vault now. Whatever's in there, they really, really don't want us to get it.
Now I just want it more.
Now that's the spirit.
Three left?
trip mines have appeared in prior Half-Life games, and the act of defusing them seemed like a natural fit for a VR game, where players can perform complex operations with their hands. By this point in the game, players have already learned how to hack Combine technology with their multi-tool, but we wanted defusing a trip mine to be more tense than the hacking puzzles. To defuse a trip mine, not only does the player have to place their hand near the laser that could trigger the mine, but they have to perform the task within just a few seconds. Early versions of this puzzle were inspired by lockpicking, resembling a series of tumblers that the player had to quickly align. Unfortunately, the tumbler design required players to rotate their wrists in an uncomfortable manner, particularly given that they had to also avoid touching the laser beam. We removed the rotational component but kept the timing element, leading to the mechanic you see in the final game. We also experimented with causing the trip mines to actually explode if the player failed to defuse them, but most players found this too punishing, especially in cases where a chain reaction of explosions could occur. Instead, the mines just stay active and the player can attempt to defuse them again. We did end up keeping this behavior for the hard difficulty setting, but added a warning sound a few seconds before the mine actually explodes, to give players some time to move away. We also experimented with allowing defused mines to be removed and redeployed by the player, but we hadn't designed enough combat scenarios around this mechanic for it to be satisfying in practice, so this was left out of the final game.
This combat arena that loops back over itself as the player winds through the tenement buildings was one of the earliest test maps built when we began adding Combine soldiers to Half-Life Alyx. One of the lessons we learned from this series of combat encounters was that fighting Combine soldiers was physically taxing on players, as we needed to pay careful attention to pacing. Taking cover, reloading, switching weapons, and acquiring targets really pushed on all the skills that players had learned up until this point. To help cut down on fatigue, we added gaps between the Combine encounters and removed some of the combat altogether to better pace the experience. The trip mines in the stairwell following this battle are a good example of one of the pacing elements we used to slow the player down and let them recuperate before the combat ramps back up again.
Russ, are they saying my name?
Yeah, that's not good.
was an interesting challenge for artists and level designers to employ environmental storytelling to paint a picture of what may have happened inside the walls of the quarantine zone. Just like the hotel, these apartments have been overrun by Zen foliage and are filled with people's belongings, abandoned in haste. In this area, the walls have been torn down, either by destructive portal storms or perhaps the Combine's cleanup effort. Barrels of fluid used by workers to try and treat or contain the Zen growth have been left behind, and it would appear that the cleanup efforts have either failed or been abandoned. By not explaining every facet of the world, we leave players with the opportunity to imagine for themselves the bigger picture of life in City 17.
back.
Oh, thank God.
Russell! God damn, it's good to see you!
Likewise. Oh, this is great. Honestly, I'd pegged your survival at about 4%.
You can thank that Vortigern. He got me back here in one piece.
Russell, put Dad on.
Alyx, baby!
Dad, we just took down a substation.
Good. Because when they move this thing, that weapon's gone. We need to get it tonight.
We will. You still got that data pod, right?
I do. Russ, this thing's bio-coded. I'm gonna need the TLI.
Yep, it's right over there.
Okay, great. You good, honey?
For sure. You go ahead. I'll be fine, Dad. I promise.
Keep that promise. I'll get to work on the data pod.
Once we had the spine of the game complete, teams went through the maps looking for additional opportunities to add the character and tone that players associate with the Half-Life games. This mannequin head grab was a fun opportunity to hit on the sci-fi horror B-movie vibe. We had a few conversations about how long to leave the head grab atop the mannequin, and decided that the experience should be analogous to catching a small dog in the middle of some mischief. We wanted players to feel like they had walked in on something they weren't supposed to see, and for them to go away feeling like every inch of the game contained something for them to find if they chose to explore it. After an early update to the headcrab sounds where details like breathing and grunting were added for the first time, we received feedback that the new sounds were too cute and familiar, moving the headcrab too far in the direction of a cuddly creature rather than an alien threat. We updated the sounds to be more threatening, but for this headcrab we brought back some of the cuter sounds to sell the headcrab's frustration with the mannequin.
In order to reduce the amount of reloading required in the heat of battle, we wanted players to be able to upgrade the pistol by increasing its ammo capacity. That might seem like a small change, but implementing it in a way that was intuitive to players and that didn't have a lot of negative side effects was surprisingly tricky to get right. Our initial mechanic for increasing the ammo capacity was to use double-sized clips. Once the pistol was upgraded, the player's backpack held clips with twice as many bullets, and those were represented by a clip model that was twice as long. But unfortunately, the longer clips presented a lot of distracting fictional problems. For one, they looked ridiculous protruding out of the bottom of the pistol. Players were also left wondering what was going on in their backpack to transform the single capacity clips that they put in there into the double capacity versions that they were pulling out. We were also left with the sort of absurd implication that the pistol clips found in the world now magically all had to be the upgraded double-sized versions. While we did scrap the double-sized clips, the concept was still enticing. We just needed to find a better metaphor. So then we started looking at the hoppers that were used on paintball guns that can store large amounts of paintballs. In fact, the final upgrade that resulted from this whole line of thinking is still internally referred to as the bullet hopper. So with this in mind, we next needed to design an intuitive interaction model. Players were already satisfied with our existing pistol interaction loop, which was eject clip, insert the next one, chamber, and then shoot. So we wanted to preserve these skills that players were already beginning to master. So players would still reload the gun as before, but small mechanical prongs would steal bullets from the inserted clip, pull them into the hopper, and then place them into the firing chamber as needed. Audio cues were also added to clearly communicate the state of the hopper loading process. The hopper also impacted the visual design that we used to convey the state of the pistol. Originally, the clips themselves had a numerical counter indicating the number of bullets remaining, and on its own this was fine, and players understood it easily. But the readout on the bullet hopper was on the opposite side of the pistol, and had a pattern of blue dots indicating the amount of bullets remaining. So these two representations in two different locations made it difficult for players to quickly determine the total number of bullets in the upgraded gun. To solve this, we designed a single visual readout on the side of the pistol grip. It structurally matched the state of a pistol clip, the pistol's bullet chamber, and the bullet hopper, if the upgrade was acquired.
Russ, how's Dad doing? Does he seem okay?
Oh, he's fine, Alyx. He's working away over there.
Good. Well, thanks.
Oh, he is missing a leg, though.
Yeah. You know, he was missing a leg before.
Right. Well, it's still gone.
Thanks, Russ.
Sure thing.
seeing that?
The Vortigons are taking down the substation!
Yes!
This might work.
Deploy technician teams to blocks 496477. Maintain priority.
generally a requirement that all new enemy types have a section of the game designed to introduce them. We rarely build the introduction early on in the process though, because it's often through playtesting that we learn exactly what aspects of the new enemy need to be highlighted in the introduction. In addition to understanding the capabilities of a new enemy, we also find introductions help solidify the very existence of the new enemy type in the player's mind. Without an explicit introduction, we sometimes find that playtesters confuse multiple enemy types, conflating them in their minds. This was the case with the Suppressor, the class of soldier that's designed to pin a player behind cover while other soldiers advance on them. The Suppressor is an inversion of the previous soldier classes, who've all focused on trying to push players out of cover. The Suppressor introduction stretches across the next 2 rooms. In the first, players see the Suppressor firing at zombies, giving the player a moment to safely observe its firing behavior. They also get to hear its associated sounds, which are important to learn for future encounters. In the second room, players learn to fight the Suppressor themselves. This is relatively straightforward when the Suppressor is alone, but will become more involved in later arenas where we combine the Suppressor with other soldier types.
Okay.
Okay, there's no direct path from where you are to the vault, so you're going to have to snake your way there.
Well, it's huge, so it shouldn't be
It isn't
hard to
practical to spend development time or art resources evenly across every part of the game, so we rely on strategic reuse of resources to maintain fidelity and specificity across the game's environments. This space was initially constructed using industrial models and textures seen throughout many previous environments. To set it apart, we added the large cables and Vortigaunt pods to imply a makeshift combine power plant whose purpose was to transmit energy to the substations. The juxtaposition of this abandoned industrial space with the large combine cables created enough visual interest to make the space feel meaningful at a relatively low cost. The cable motif was subsequently added to other parts of the game to increase visual interest and give the player a sense of being led toward the vault. It may not be obvious, but the cables exiting through the ceiling here continue on to the exterior of the building, across the large construction courtyard, and over the roof of the distillery building, presumably continuing on to a substation or other combine infrastructure. Players may not notice that continuation, but such details help guide us in building a world that feels connected and consistent.
One problem we faced with the VR movement styles that Alyx supported was keeping the combat experience from diverging based upon whether players were using teleport or continuous movement. If the combat was significantly different depending on the player's movement setting, our playtesting requirements could explode combinatorially. One way that we prevented this combinatorial explosion was by ensuring that AIs could sense player movement no matter which locomotion style the player was using. To do this, we created a visual proxy for players using teleport locomotion. Imagine a scenario where the player is behind cover, hidden from a soldier's sight. If the player used continuous movement to run to another piece of nearby cover, the soldier would see them while they were out in the open. But a player who instantly teleported from one piece of cover to the next would not be seen. To solve this discrepancy, when a player teleports, we leave a breadcrumb trail of invisible visual proxies, which the enemy AI can see. These proxies pass information to the AI, similar to what it would have gathered from seeing the player perform the movement directly. In this case, the soldier would know the teleporting player had left the original cover and run across open ground to the new cover, just like a player using continuous motion. While obviously not identical, in that the soldier didn't have a chance to take a shot at the teleporting player, these kinds of features did allow us to reduce the number of ways our AI logic needed to take player movement options into consideration.
For Half-Life Alyx, we wanted to expand the functionality of our soundscape system, which is used to play ambient sounds. In prior games, we could generally only play one soundscape at a time. The player would be hearing either soundscape A or soundscape B, with a brief crossfade from one to the other. In this game, the soundscapes are much more flexible and can be overlapped in ways that enable more realistic transitions. For example, the volume of different soundscapes can be controlled by the player's position and the open or closed state of particular doors in the world. We frequently use this functionality in areas like this transition between indoor and outdoor spaces. If you pause outside for a moment, you'll notice the crickets, birds, distant dog barks, and other environmental sounds that help paint the picture of the quarantine zone late in the day. As you move into the indoor area, you'll notice the outdoor soundscape diminish as you move away from the door. In fact, if you close the door, the volume of the outdoor soundscape is reduced even further. And as you progress into the building, you'll begin to notice the indoor soundscape consisting of the indistinct hum of machinery and buzz of electrical fixtures.
We can take a shortcut through that building.
Okay, I don't see a way into this building, so I'm gonna look around. What is this place, anyway?
It's a distillery. They made vodka and things like that.
Is vodka good?
Oh, God, no.
Russell doesn't like vodka. Got it.
Well, I never said that.
But it's not good?
It's poison.
But
I love it. Everyone loves it.
okay, that's all very confusing. Let me figure out how to get in, and then I'll find you some.
Wonderful if you could, actually, yes.
our teleport and continuous locomotion modes, we provide corresponding ladder climbing methods. By default, player using teleport locomotion can target a ladder and after a short timer, get teleported to the top or the bottom, depending on where they started. The timer was necessary to ensure that players were intentionally using the ladder. We didn't want them to unintentionally target the ladder and become disoriented when they found themselves at the other end. Players using continuous locomotion can directly grab ladders to climb up or down. In this mode, they can grab a ladder rung and move their hand down to raise their body, or move their hand up to lower it. This allows players to move up or down the ladder rung by rung in a natural way. This mode turned out to be so popular that we added it as an option even for players using teleport locomotion. As it happens, most of the ladders in our game do not extend very far beyond the upper landing area. This made dismounting the top of a ladder challenging for players using continuous ladder climbing, since there's very little ladder to grab onto above the landing area. To solve this, we detect when the player stops holding the ladder with both hands and automatically teleport them to either the top or the bottom, based on the direction they were climbing. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of explicit ladder training in the game, so some players are surprised by this teleport behavior if they accidentally let go with both hands while climbing. Nevertheless, this was a better alternative to leaving the players hanging or forcing them to fall down if they let go with both hands, especially since some of our ladders are rather long and it would be tedious to have to reclimb just because a player happened to let go shortly before reaching the top.
Up and running again. Ignore that. We'll meet you outside. It looks as if there are combined barricades up ahead. They're stopping anyone from getting any closer to the vault.
Okay, so what do you think?
Make your way into the distillery and see where it takes you. With my drone back online, we've finally got the... Oh, no! Kidding me! wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of that.